Okay, let's start with the first webinar of Eurofleets Plus. I hope all you can hear me. Okay, that's great. In this webinar, we're going to explain the cruise data management plans and data management in general for the Eurofleets Plus project. I'm Thomas van den Bergen from the Belgian Marine Data Center. We are one of the reference data centers. What that is, we'll explain later in the webinar. The Belgian Marine Data Center is the work leader for the data management aspects, and that included writing the DMP template, which I'll explain in this webinar. Your microphones will be muted. If you want to raise a question during the presentation, please type it in the Q&A box. We'll try to answer all questions at the end of the webinar. We're also joined by Annelies Strobel from the Alfred Wegener Institute. She will, if it's needed, but because it's not the main topic of this, this webinar, she can answer some questions on the call writing specifically. Please note that there will be another webinar in the future about this topic. So the goals of this webinar are to illustrate the need for a data management plan, a DMP. This is mandatory for the project. We will show you when to do it and how to do it using a web application called DMP Roadmap. And specifically, we'll show you with the instance we built of DMP Roadmap how to do it. We'll create an account and create a first draft DMP. And then later on, as a last point, we'll shortly talk about the data management in general. So this webinar is intended for anyone who wants to apply in all the Eurofleets access programs. So that means the sea access programs, which includes both ship time and marine equipment applications. So as a principal investigator, the Transnational Accord, all open, and maybe more on that later. So as I said, Eurofleets is an Horizon 2020 funded project, and Horizon 2020 asks of each project, global project, that they are fair and open. So Eurofleets is a project, and the funded cruises are considered sub-projects. All of those, so the general project and the funded cruises, should adhere to the FAIR principles. So the FAIR is an acronym, stands for Findable, Accessible, Interoperable, and Reusable. You probably have heard this a lot lately. In the next slide, I'll explain this briefly, what it exactly means for you. The crucial thing is that in today's world, data is delivered to humans by software agents. Both are interrelated. When you visit a website, it's the software that takes care of it. It's the web services that take care of it. And in order to do that in a fluent way, data and metadata exist together and work together. Additionally, in Horizon 2020, there's an important addition that all the data generated through projects must be made open. However, it is still possible to opt out of open data, and it is also possible to apply an embargo period to your data. Since 2017, Horizon 2020 projects must apply the open access. There was a trial period, and this trial has now been made final since 2017. So, as I said, Eurofleets Plus follows the Horizon 2020 rules, and Horizon 2020 also created a data management plan template, which we follow in broad lines. So this DMP template consisted of a set of questions which we have adopted for Eurofleets Plus. Shortly, the fair data principles. So these date from a paper by Wilkinson in Nature from a few years back. In the meantime, they've been refined, for instance, also by the Force 11 group. They condensed them a bit and actualized them. Just in short words, the essential bits are that for your data to be found, it needs a landing page. It's not mandatory that the data itself is reported together with the metadata page on your data set. And the important thing is that there's the license attached to it, which could be either that could mean that your data remains closed or is truly open data. Important is interoperability also, meaning who have included in your data and metadata that this information is externally defined. What we mean by that is that that word has a web-based representation in, let's say, a vocabulary, maybe using linked data to express what it means, so that each term and terminology groups are semantically joined and can be referenced so that there are no interoperability problems and interpretation problems. The reusability of your data is, of course, dependent on the fact that you offer your data. So that means that the licensing must be clear and accessible, that especially you report the data provenance so that new people know what exactly has been done with the data they see at that stage. So they shouldn't do the same steps you did, for instance, or know some information about its inherent quality at that time because you have filtered out bad data, etc. Also, standardization of the numeric information is crucial to enable reusability. So like I said, the Horizon 2020 requires you to follow the FAIR data principles and also to make your data open with some caveats. Those are possible. So it's important to distinguish a couple of things. So when you have open data, it's still possible that this data has some constraints that you want. It's open, but it's maybe not usable for any purpose. And so, and especially if that would lead to a risk, organizations typically waiver any liability for the data that is unfit for such and such purposes. Open data can still apply that thing. Also, on top of open data and on top of closed data as well, there's still the principle that you should always attribute data, where it's possible in open data to explicitly add that you should attribute. This is basically best practice and good practice with colleagues to do so. Also informing, collaborating together, these typically form part of a data policy, which is something that should be described in the data management plan, as well as those constraints, as well as the fact that the data is open, to what extent the data is open. Because the open data means that you provide a web access to data free of charge, monetary charge, the same way for any person finding that data. So if you have a login system that there's no change based on what university or organization that person is from, that a user may use those data without any restrictions. Now, open data, within the licensing schemes, there can be added some restrictions. And the benefit is that those restrictions are really upfront and you don't need to answer any individual question of the data user later on. And then finally, that the data should be redistributable and reusable by anyone. Also, it can be made different in the way the license is inherited in further copies of the data. For instance, with Creative Commons, which is called share alike. Now, a data management plan, as I briefly said, should include information on what data policy you want to see applied to your data, what licensing you want to see applied, whether it's open, whether it's closed, whether you want some embargo on it. But mainly it describes what your data is about, how you have gathered it, how you've processed it with regards to quality control, with regards to processing to actually make it representable for dissemination. These steps should be documented as soon as possible in the whole chain, the derivation chain of the data. Also, after the project, it's important that you already described the things you are planning to do with the data after the project. So basically, you're the person who have your own procedures. Those could be partly of your institute, but you should document those procedures. Probably you did this before with own documents, but now there is, thanks to the data management plan, a more formal way to do it. And this prevents actually from new issues arising because you could have foreseen them and maybe even prevented them because you have the data management plan. So it leads to informed decisions on your procedures. It saves time and problems later on, and it gets your project funded. Not only Horizon 2020 projects, probably many more project funding organizations require this. And they are a small step towards fairness. I mentioned here, they're not a punitive tool, meaning that it's for one individual, it's nearly impossible to achieve full fairness, as there are some details I didn't mention in the previous slides. It's not a punitive tool because it's quite difficult to arrive at it, but an organization as Eurofleets Plus helps you towards achieving fairness, and the data management plan is one part of it. So in Eurofleets Plus, we have a difference between the general data management plan and the cruise data management plan. Today, we'll talk actually about the cruise data management plan, which is more aptly called the Access Program Proposal Data Management Plan, because all access programs, not only those leading to a single cruise, but also to cruise participation or to technology deployment devices samples, need a DMP, which I'll tell about later also. These detail your own data management, but as it's a Horizon 2020 project, Eurofleets Plus has a general DMP as well. That enables the fairness, so you can focus on the data. We have defined there the general data flow per data type. When your project is approved, it will be reported inside the larger DMP, so we and you know what pathway it will have towards being published online as it is open data. Also in the general data management plan, we applied licensing. We have defined who the actors are, what the principal investigator does, what the RV operator does, what the reference data centers do. These are actually like the Belgian Marine Data Center is one of them, HCMR in Greece, and OGS in Trieste in Italy is also a reference data center. These centers are responsible to help you with your data management plan in a second stage, and also to gather your data. So your project will be assigned to one of them via a mechanism separate from yourself, on which you don't have to do anything special. So the data management for the cruise, so rather for a program, as it is a mandatory thing to complete, is it consists of two steps: the preliminary DMP and the full DMP. The preliminary DMP must be submitted together with the proposal submission. So as I said, for the Ocean Sea call, it's 27th of September. It consists of 14 mandatory questions. In this stage, in this phase, you can leave out details, but you should already address the issues that you see or describe at least the pathways and the QC steps you will do, what the types of the data are. But you can leave out details. You should be broad, but without detail. These will be assessed on completeness by the scientific liaison panel. These are evaluators that will also evaluate your proposal on the cruise itself. The full DMP is created, or rather amended, from the preliminary DMP after you might have been awarded the cruise. So it has to be completed after the approval. It's an enlarged version. It consists of 26 mandatory questions in which you need to provide more detail. So you can then copy paste your answers, extend them, and answer the other questions. Then the reference data centers are coming in. They actually review that. They feed it back to you if there are any questions. Otherwise, they just use that as a building block to do their work later on. Especially, which is important for a DMP, is that it's a living document. It should evolve. Especially, well, it's appreciated that after the cruise you modify this, as the most processing will take place at that stage, and the most crucial details will become known. We focus in the DMP tool on provenance of your data, so what you do with the data, what procedures you're doing with it, as those will end up in the metadata. So, and these things you only get to know while doing them, well, know in detail. So, and briefly here, like I said, both the preliminary and the full DMP are mandatory for all the access programs. Note that the COPI, the remote transnational access programs, are not completely defined yet, so there could be some changes still. But as it is right now for the RTA program, the preliminary DMP is optional unless you want to apply an embargo or a data opt-out, which shows that these are actually non-standard situations. I'd also like to stress that all the programs need to submit their data in the same way according to the data management guidelines. The data management guidelines, we'll check them out later on. They contain the rules on the data management plan, but also what you need to do with the data, how to submit the data, etc. So these are all 4 types of access programs need to follow the data management guidelines. Data from your cruise, like I said, it should make use of an open license, preferably the Creative Commons licenses. The default license from the general DMP is the public domain license, which means no explicit attribution needed by users, but scientific use or etiquette requires this. It is possible to apply the CC BY, in which you explicitly, when the data is reused, you explicitly ask for attribution of the list of all authors of any contributing data sets. You can also specify that non-commercial use is prohibited. Commercial use is prohibited, which is the CC BY NC license. I said previously, also the share alike. This is not really an open license because it actually makes sharing more difficult because it applies the same specificalities for each iteration of the data set from now forever. So the data should be submitted to the reference data centers, even the data with an embargo. So you can apply up to 2 years an embargo, for instance, because you want to publish the data in a journal. It's possible to stop making it public, although you have applied an open license. The data centers know this, and they will work with your data, prepare it to import in the necessary data repositories. This is something we do for you, but we will not publish the data, make it public, although they are in the data repositories, or at least prepare the data for it to be ready for the data repositories. It's also possible to opt out of open data, in which case there is no license actually. Copyright is the default at that stage. We only allow this if your data would be commercially interesting, if you deem it commercially interesting, if you think it is patentable, if it is, if there is a problem regarding national security, ethics. For instance, this is not the case in marine science, of course, ethical patient considerations, or this is applicable species protection, sensitive species protection. But of course, the data management plan must justify the reasons for opting out of the data. And at that stage, you should also provide other ways you will make your data available to, for instance, near colleagues, close by colleagues, because actually fairness defines a level of openness that you define yourself. The most default level is your nearby colleagues. Otherwise, there could be no scientific collaboration. So really closed data doesn't exist in that respect. And the DMP must justify this. So we use the data management plan roadmap application. It's a web application. We've adapted it for Eurofleets Plus. It allows to manage many data management plans across different institutes. We've chosen this because it's quite difficult to manage 50 files, 50 Word files, for instance, for each candidate. It provides a login with an account. We've created one template, which is the Eurofleets cruise template that contains both the preliminary and the full phase. You create one plan, so for a program or for a cruise. DMPs are private by default. However, it is possible to make your data management plan public. We don't advise you to do that, but it is possible. On the other hand, you can also invite other contributors to your data management plan. But then again, those people can't invite other people later on. And the most important thing is that you're able to download your file as a PDF file, which is what you will need when you are in the official cruise submission portal managed by AWI. We also want you to make all changes in the DMP roadmap. So if you download the DMP as a Word file, please don't add to that Word file later on. Just do it inside the DMP roadmap. It's easier for everybody involved. So the website, please note down this website. It's dmp.ef-ears.eu, because we will visit it right now. Also important and linked from that page is the guidance document, which contains all the information on data management within Eurofleets Plus. Also, of course, how to write the DMP with DMP roadmap. There's a step-by-step manual also there. If you missed some steps, we will see. The first thing you do is create your account. We'll show that together. The thing is that you have to click My Organization Isn't Listed. We will create a test plan. We will try to share this document and download it with, or at least show you how to download it. So we go to the internet. I have already opened the website. So if you could visit this, I will actually log out, because that's what you will see too. So we are there. So this is the guidelines document that I showed you, the PDF file. So this is just a guidelines document. We'll talk right now about this step-by-step guide. This included right there. There's a summary that shows what you have to do. We'll come back to that in a few slides also, the steps you have to take. We go back to the website. So you guys should create an account. I won't do that because I already have several. If you could all do this. Now, important here is that you click My Organization Isn't Listed and that you manually type what your organization is, because we can't know all the marine research organizations beforehand. Well, actually we can't, but it's a huge list. The password should be, can be of any size, but should contain more than 3 numbers. You can show the password, and finally you have to click I accept the terms and conditions. Then you click create account. This will immediately bring you to, let's say, your home page in which you can see your plans. Sorry, you can't see the website?
No.
Oh, stop share. Merci. Okay, I got the message that you can't see the website, that you are still seeing the presentation. I hope you can see it right now. If not, I'll get a message, I hope. Okay, thanks, the website is available. So I was actually typing my, in the create account tab, you see here. So you have to go to dmp.ef-ears.eu. You have to type your credentials, your email address, and finally your organization. And you have to type a password which should contain more than 3 characters, numbers. You should accept the terms and conditions. When you click create account, the account is created and you will receive an email that it is successful. I will sign in. Well, also before actually logging in, you can all create the account. So by click create account, we'll also hit the DMP templates button here. This can be seen without logging in, and here you can download the questions both in PDF and Word form. So in PDF, the questions are generated automatically from the database. So just to give you an overview of what I talked about in slides, the Horizon 2020 list of questions in the DMP, they actually follow the FAIR principles, and they add a data summary part, an allocation of resources, a data security, ethical aspects, other issues. You see here, those have no question in the preliminary data management plan. This is the full data management plan. And here you see those questions appearing. Of course, this page is only post-award. This has to be completed before the 27th of September together with your application. We actually link to the data management guidelines from time to time to show you a representative list of metadata elements, so you don't have to guess which ones could be applicable. The thing is that the Horizon 2020 DMP is really general. It doesn't include anything about one single scientific community. So, and as we build upon the experience of CDataNet, the previous Eurofleets projects, of course, we can add all these things that make your life easier. For instance, metadata elements or meta information around values that we need, and for which you should show an informedness and to give an idea how you will during the project capture and store this information. So back to the DMP roadmap application, I will log in. I am now logged in as a administrator, which is a button you won't see. You arrive at my dashboard. You can also create, so you can create a plan here or there. We'll create a plan. I type my cruise. I have many my cruises at the moment. So the name, of course, you should only create one, but the name shouldn't be unique. The primary research organization, that's actually not applicable. So no research organization associated, or my research organization is not listed. That's the thing. Here you must complete Eurofleets Plus as the primary funding organization. If you click Create Plan, it will use the plan that is made available for the combination of Eurofleets Plus and any research institute. So you just see here the project title, which you just entered, and you can change that later. For the time being, we're just creating a mock project. The funder is Eurofleets Plus. The grant number should not be completed for a preliminary data management plan. It will be the number you will get when your application is successful. I don't know exactly if that's the case. It's not so important. In a way, more important is that you add an identifier for which you can use the acronym of your cruise or any other identifier that's easy to use for us. The abstract you can copy from your submission as well. This is the same as your account name. You can add those as well. The data contact person will, in many cases, be yourself again. It can be a different person. There's a question later on that asks this again, and please, if you select this person, it should be the same as the question later on. It's important to click Save each time whenever you change a thing. If you click Save, you go to the next tab. So you have 6 tabs, and you see the phases here. The plan overview, it lists the questions again. And then you can start writing the plan from here. You go back to the next pane. You see again the questions. And here you can see all the questions separated by chapter. And in this answer box, you can add your answer. You can use formatting like bullet lists. It's no problem that your answers are short and to the point. You shouldn't use prose. It's okay to use bulleted lists if that would make the explanation clearer. Those comments are actually when you would share your DMP with another person, like a collaborator, you will be able to type some comments to share with all the collaborators if you would work together on one. It's probably not applicable to Eurofleets Plus. So you move on, you answer all the questions. If the question is not applicable, you just type not applicable NA, and you shortly justify why it wouldn't be applicable. Some questions are start with an if, so that's that could be then that answer could be not applicable. The same for the full DMP, but that's something for post-award. You see here the completion rate. You can share this, like I said. So the default test plans are set to private visibility by default. So a DMP with less than 50%, you can't change this. So be sure that it's set to private. I think private is the default. Actually, be pretty sure to set it actually to private. So here you can invite a collaborator. You just type his email address, and then you can say what that person should be able to do. If you add a comment, he will be able to add into the comment box we saw in the previous tab. Finally, important is that you download your preliminary DMP for it to be attached to your submission. Just select all three. Also the unanswered questions, so that we can see which questions are left empty. The format should be PDF. Here you can change the formatting of the PDF, but you shouldn't actually do that. We'll type something and see whether it downloads it. And you click save. You have to click save each time after each answer. It's really important. The application will not otherwise save your answer. And you can see who did it. And also, like, if there will be a collaborator, you can see that will be another person. And then if you go to download and we click download plan, the database the database generates the DMP. This is the actual DMP. The database representation technically is not the DMP. This is the DMP. So the answer appeared here, and like you see, the questions, the unanswered ones are indicated. So let's hope I go back to my presentation. So I will stop sharing my screen and share the presentation. And I hope this worked. So I think we saw everything on the DMP roadmap, the hands-on training. Now a short word on data management in general. I hope the slide is clear. It seems daunting, this slide. It's the only slide with an image, so that's good. The principal investigator, this slide explains what each actor's roles are. You're the principal investigator here at the bottom. You play a central role in Eurofleets. You will be deploying, measuring, observing on the vessel. The vessel will at the same time acquire en route data. You will generate data files, or rather the devices will generate data files. One team can generate multiple files. It can generate just one or more than one. The files are possible, the devices can be read out by you, in which case you immediately store them on your machine, or they can be read out by the vessel operator. They store them, you request them later on, they provide them to you. And you have to gather all the files other than the en route data, which will be transferred via the EARS software. These steps, I hope you can see my mouse, the steps between the EARS server on the vessel and the central EARS infrastructure. These are dotted lines, so they are in development right now. We still have to settle on an exact route, how this data will be shared. The finality of this data, that it ends up with the data managers from the reference data centers. So back to your data. That means any manual observations, for instance, looking at animals, scraping samples from rocks, algae, actually taking measurements with onboard devices. So much?
Not seeing the right slide.
Again.
Stuck on the slide 27.
Ah, on the slide 27.
With the DMP address.
Ah, yeah.
You should open the chat box.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can see directly when people are commenting. Should open this, but I don't know if you see it when you open.
Ah, they see the scheme now.
Okay.
No? Ah, okay.
I don't know. When I left the,
Ah, yeah.
the office there. I can check.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Ask them and they will reply back.
Yeah. So I hope you can see the central slide. So you as a scientist, you make the deployments of devices, CTDs, single sensors. It's also possible that you perform long-term deployments. We suppose that this will be a rarer case in Eurofleets Plus, as it's a single cruise. But in any case, these files generate one or more data files. These files are either accessed by you immediately from the device, read out from the device immediately after the cruise, or they're read out by the operator, in which case they will store them on themselves. They should provide them to you. You will then be responsible to send the files to the AMOPNet data ingestion portal. So I would like to tell that some parts of this graph are still under consideration. In any case, there will be some sort of ingestion portal. It will very probably be the AMOPNet data ingestion portal because it has been used for similar projects. So thanks to from Eurofleets to AMOPNet for doing this. So you will be responsible to this ingestion portal. With metadata, we mean the metadata of the data sets from your cruise. This will be, the files will be wrapped up as one cruise together in an archive, for instance, a zip. And then later on, the data managers from the reference data centers, they will read out what is stored in AMOPNet. They will check out the metadata, download the files. They will do conversion, quality management, control, according to the CDataNet protocols. So in CDataNet, during the years, many different, well, a couple of file formats have been made, and several applications to quality control the data have been made. So we will make use of these and finally publish your data on the CDataNet portals. The main CDataNet portal is the Common Data Index, so your data will appear there. Also, the data will appear in the AMOPNet data ingestion portal. That's it's a static view consortium, so that means they haven't reached the full level of fairness. They're accessible. People can find on the website. They have good metadata, but they're not yet interoperable, and that's what the reference data centers will do. So your data sets and ones from your colleagues will be assigned to the data managers by a responsible here, by the master of the data ingestion portal. They will do the work. And then also an important aspect is the metadata of your data set. That will be will feed the same metadata as used on CDataNet in order to find your data. So let's say, for instance, the bounding box on the area where the sampling has been done will be applied in the CDI metadata format. Very important, didn't mention it yet, another metadata format that should be provided by the principal investigator, which will probably be you persons, because you apply for the C calls and you will be PIs for that cruise. So you will be responsible. This is a general CDataNet practice. You probably have done this before. To create the CSR which is the cruise summary report made by the BSH in Germany. So all these steps are detailed right now in the data management guidelines as well. And then also, I forgot to mention, the AVIO portal will also be giving an index on the data that the gathered through acquisition. And the AVIO portal will also interface with the cruise summary reports. These are rather detailed details from the then the last slide, just on the reporting, which I just already mentioned. There are some timelines. So the metadata of the cruise, which I said, the CDataNet cruise summary report, it should be provided within 2 weeks after the cruise, which is mentioned in the guidelines for applicants in the reporting part, which you can find on the Eurofleets Plus website. The metadata of the data sets, all other aspects should be provided after the cruise within 2 months. So that's the metadata of the data sets, which is these 4 parts, except the en route data are provided to the AMONTnet data ingestion portal, all of them within 2 months. The metadata, CTD data, any deployments, in fact, also 2 months after the results are obtained. Manual data, which can be direct measurements on samples, water samples, biology samples, sediment samples. It's possible that obtaining the result for such samples takes a longer time because the samples are analyzed in the laboratory on shore. So here that's why we say after the result is obtained. So for these, it's not necessarily directly after 2 months after the cruise. You should also provide operationware. We will have another webinar on the EARS software, so how you build these operations meta information, which basically is I've taken this sample for this purpose with this device at that time point, or the vessel has arrived at the place I want to be at the station at that time, and we start the sampling 10 minutes later. It's a logbook basically, so this has to be provided together with the data. So any manual interactions with your scientific field is this type of data and should be provided together with data and metadata together. We'll provide you more information on this later. So there will be a webinar also on call writing very soon. I don't know the exact date yet. And like the EARS front-end application will, as well as data reporting. And at that stage, we will be certain, of course, about the exact workflows. So in any case, you should check the Eurofleets Plus news webpage information on when these webinars will take place. So that's it from my side, and we are now open to questions. So you can use the QA tool for this or the chat box. So yeah, there's a question, of course, on when the slides will be available. I think the slides will be put on the DMP website itself together with the guidelines, and the video will be made available via the Eurofleets Plus website. I'm very certain Neve and Bernadette will do this, and the slides as well. So yeah, that was the question until now. It's been asked already a long time ago, so maybe there are some new questions. Okay, if there are no more questions, I think we can stop this first webinar, and during somewhere in the autumn or winter 2019. Okay, thank you.